Mark Devonport, BBC News at the United Nations.
And that's it from me for this morning. Time now for the weather with Victoria Graham.
Good morning. Well, an unsettled start to the week, but get past Tuesday and Wednesday and many of us will have something to look forward to with an area of high pressure just building to the south of us. It should extend across many parts of Britain, lightening up the winds and hopefully providing us with some sunshine. It will be a slow start to the day, and because the winds will be light, the mist and fog may take a time to clear. But hopefully by afternoon, many of us seeing that sunshine breaking through and a crisp autumnal feeling day with highs of around 14 degrees in the south. That's 57 Fahrenheit. But the middle of the week does look fairly unsettled, particularly on Tuesday night into Wednesday, a band of rain, heavy at times, followed by a very strong wind, gusting into gale, even severe gale force at times. We will certainly be watching that weather over the next few days. For Scotland, perhaps Northern Ireland and Northern England, we could see gusts of wind in excess of around 60 or 70 miles per hour. A strong wind through tonight as well, but not quite as windy as it was during Sunday itself. And because the winds are southerly, I think quite a warm night, milder than last night. 7 to 10 degrees will take us through into this morning. Also fairly mild because of the cloud associated with this weather system. We've also been seeing some rain through the night as well, just moderately falling across many western areas, but it has been pushing eastwards all the time. I think through dawn and into the early part of the morning, that rain constantly trying to push its way southeastwards. So with us through parts of the Midlands and the southeast first thing and stretching back towards the West Country. Behind, a brief respite, but then showers quickly developing through western areas, say through Ireland and northwestern Scotland. I think through lunchtime into the afternoon, those showers could be quite heavy and squally at times. If we do catch one, it will feel a little bit on the cool side as well. This rain lingering around the southeast for a fair time, East Anglia down towards Kent, and I think Kent and the southern counties could stay quite cloudy for much of the day. But that brightness constantly pushing on behind. So will the showers, and quite breezy as well. But again, at least that wind is coming in from the southwest, so I think we could see highs around 14 or 15 degrees in the south, despite the lack of sunshine in the southeast, around 12 or 13 further northwards. Tuesday starts off fine and bright for, well, pretty much all of us. Again, some mistiness first thing in the south, then out towards the west, western windy conditions quickly spreading in, and that wind will be quite strong, particularly on Tuesday night into Wednesday. Those isobars really quite tightly packed. That wet weather spreading away to the southeast through the day, followed by a little bit of brightness, some showers, but that wind will stay strong.
Breaking the news.
Police said that it is still too early to say what caused the crash.
We don't yet know whether this agreement is durable.
Once again, there have been skirmishes.
People of Scotland have paid their last respects to Donald Dewar.
24 hours a day, BBC News 24.
Tonight on New Look BBC One.
I remembered you saying you were in need of a new jigsaw, so...
Back-to-back comedy with One Foot in the Grave at 9. Followed by the Royal Family at 9:30.
Then join us for the BBC 10 o'clock news.
That's the New Look BBC One, this Monday night.
This is BBC One. Good morning.
And welcome to Breakfast from BBC News with Sophie Rayworth and Jeremy Bowen.
It is 6 o'clock on Monday, the 23rd of October.
Good morning, welcome to the programme.
The headlines this morning: diplomatic efforts to bring peace to the Middle East continue. As violence on the West Bank flares again, President Clinton tries to persuade Israel to revive the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement.
Railtrack will learn this morning how much money it'll have to spend on track and safety.
And Paddy Ashdown reveals details of a pact with Tony Blair, which could have led to a coalition government.
This morning's main business news: tell Sid British Gas is splitting again.
And in sport, England turn to Peter Taylor for now. The man the FA sacked last year is back to manage the team against Italy next month.
More on all of that later, but first here's Maura with this morning's News 24 briefing.
Thank you. Good morning. Israel has used helicopter gunships against Palestinians they say had attacked Jewish homes near Jerusalem and the West Bank town of Bethlehem. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to resolve the Middle East crisis are continuing. President Clinton has spoken to the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and the two leaders agreed they would try to implement the Sharm el-Sheikh ceasefire agreement reached last week.
The rocket attacks came within a few hours of the latest deadly street battles on the West Bank and Gaza. The shooting and the rock throwing continued for hours, and there were more casualties. 4 Palestinians died, including this 14-year-old boy. The exchanges, slightly less intense than in previous days, came as the Arab summit in Cairo ended. Many Palestinians will be disappointed by what came out of it. They'd wanted actions against Israel. What they got was mostly words. The Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat arrived back in the Gaza Strip and now has the job of trying to portray the summit as a success for his people. It won't be easy. Some of his own supporters want the uprisings to go on. In Israel, there was some relief the summit didn't go further. The Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, was still angered by the Arab leaders' condemnation of Israeli use of force. He's now formally called time out on the peace process. That had been expected. He believes there's no point in talking whilst the violence continues. But others believe that Mr. Barak has stepped off the peace train to buy himself more time to set up a government of national unity. He's in political trouble at home and is searching for allies from the right who are against the peace process. It's one more complicating factor in a crisis that is yet to cause more anguish for everyone involved. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, Jerusalem.
In an hour's time, the rail regulator Tom Windsor will announce how much Railtrack will be allowed to charge the train companies to use its tracks. Any increase would mean that Railtrack could spend more money on renewing worn-out rails like the one thought to be responsible for causing the Hatfield crash last week, in which 4 people died.
Railtrack's the company which owns the tracks, signals and stations of Britain's mainline network. Today's announcement is crucial in determining how much money the company will get to maintain the system and to carry out improvements such as faster lines and new routes. It's thought that the rail regulator will allow the company a substantial increase in revenues over the next 5 years. Reports suggest that £5 billion could come direct from the government in the form of grants. That's £1 billion more than the regulator had originally planned. Railtrack will also be allowed to raise some extra money by charging train operators more for using the tracks. That increase is likely to be carefully balanced to avoid any substantial rise in fares which might scare passengers away. The broken rail which caused last week's crash near Hatfield is a prime example of the work that needs doing. Railtrack will spend much of the extra revenue on maintenance and renewal of track and signals. The rail regulator has previously said that there's a very strong public demand that the money is spent wisely and that the years of deterioration of the network are not repeated. Simon Montague, BBC News.
Labour and Liberal Democrats had agreed a pact to form a coalition government, according to the diaries of Paddy Ashdown, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats. Extracts of the diaries, which are the latest political writings to be published this year, show the extent to which he worked alongside Tony Blair and reveal a strong but somewhat secret relationship.
It was down to Paddy Ashdown and his special relationship with Tony Blair that the Liberal Democrats have got so close to power. Under Paddy Ashdown, they've shared a table with ministers in a joint cabinet committee. In his diaries, Mr. Ashdown says they could have even formed a coalition government. He says in secret talks before the election, he and Mr. Blair had agreed to work together to change the electoral system to proportional representation. Uncomfortable reading for senior figures on both sides. This weekend, the Deputy Prime Minister made clear he wouldn't have had anything to do with it.
No. Paddy's dreams. And look, why shouldn't Paddy dream about it and now write about it in his book? Of course we agreed to have meetings. Tony Blair made it absolutely clear. We would discuss issues of constitutional matters, right? And we continued to do that, and we thought that was profitable and right on major constitutional issues. But Paddy wanted to go further. He wants to sit in this little chair in the cabinet and become part of the government. I wouldn't have sat the same, but no.
Paddy Ashdown also describes Tony Blair's concerns about delivering PR because of Gordon Brown's reservations. Peter Mandelson and Robin Cook are listed as the figures who were broadly in support of the project to unite the political centre and the left. Mr Ashdown's diaries will worry traditionalists in both parties who still view each other with suspicion. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
MPs returned to the House of Commons today after their long summer break to choose a new Speaker to succeed Betty Boothroyd. She stood down in July after 8 years in office. But this afternoon's selection is surrounded by controversy, with many MPs complaining that the current procedure is antiquated and potentially unfair. There are 13 contenders for the job. A one-day-old baby boy has been snatched from a hospital in the Irish Republic. The child was taken from a maternity ward at the Erinville Hospital in Cork around 7 o'clock yesterday evening. The woman who took the infant was chased by staff but escaped after jumping into a waiting car. The American Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, has arrived in North Korea at the start of a historic visit. No US cabinet minister has visited North Korea before, and Ms. Albright will be the first to meet the country's leader, Kim Jong-il. If the tour is successful, it's thought it could pave the way for a visit by President Clinton before he leaves office in January. A woman from South Wales has died after sitting in a cramped plane seat on a long-haul flight from Australia. Emma Christopherson collapsed after arriving at Heathrow Airport and died from a blood clot. She's the latest victim of so-called economy class syndrome, a form of thrombosis which some doctors believe kills dozens of airline passengers each year.
Millions of people fly long haul every year. Most arrive fit and well at their destination. But in recent years there's been a growing awareness of the dangers of sitting still for too long. The so-called economy class syndrome is caused by blood clots forming because the body is too inactive. Emma Christopherson was a healthy 28-year-old, but she lost consciousness at Heathrow and died before reaching hospital. The cause was deep-veined thrombosis, blood clotting in the veins. Sitting in a cramped seat for too long can cause poor circulation and a blood clot, normally in the legs. The clot can then work its way through the body and reach the lungs or heart. In the worst cases, this can kill. Aspirin can lessen the chances of falling ill because it thins the blood. Drinking water, not alcohol, can help, as can simply moving around the cabin. But doctors are still divided about this condition. Miss Christopherson's parents now want airlines to give out health warnings. Toby Seeley, BBC News.
4 out of 5 British adults believe that refugees come to Britain because they regard it as a soft touch, according to a report published today. The survey of over 2,000 people for Reader's Digest also shows 2/3 think there are too many immigrants in Britain and too much is done to help them.
The survey, called Is Britain a Nasty Nation, shows that on average the public estimates that 20% of the population here are immigrants, when the real figure is around 4%. Views were relatively mixed on whether there is more, less or about the same amount of racial prejudice in Britain now as there was 5 years ago. But many people grossly overestimated the financial aid asylum seekers receive, believing on average that a single adult gets £113 a week to live on. In fact, the figure was found to be £36.54 a week in vouchers, and that to be spent only at designated stores, just £10 being allowed to be converted into cash.
The truth is, most refugees have left behind a good economic standard of life. They come here because their lives are in danger, and once they arrive, they fester in bed and breakfast hotels for months and years, not allowed to work, living on vouchers. It's not a life that you would wish on anybody.
Immigration issues are certain to be a factor in the forthcoming general election, with 1/3 of the public believing racial intolerance will grow worse in the next 5 years. It's vital that this debate deals with facts, not prejudice. Emma Howard, BBC News at the Refugee Council.
I'm back in half an hour. Now it's back to Jeremy and Sophie.
Thanks a lot, Maura.